Michael David Cobb Bowen for Cobb Vision, and I am trying to once and for all get the Shaquanda Cotton issue out of my head. And part of the problems of dealing with this issue is that it's gone into so many different details that there's not a quick and dirty way that you can abstract it. And I've put together different blog pieces, but none of them just quite work. And I feel like I have to be comprehensive so I can, put the question to bed, as well as reconcile myself with the people that I disagree with, because it's important going forward. There's a lot of things to say about it, but first let me qualify my whole approach to this from what I consider the old school perspective. The very first thing that I saw when I saw this was what everybody else saw. A horrible injustice done to an innocent black child for no good reason. An incredible sentence of 7 years in prison for shoving somebody. And I think the first time I read the story, it was either Bomani Jones or Avery Tooley. I'm not sure whom, because they went into the definition of shove. And that was the thing that got my notice, but I didn't write anything about it at the time. I heard the story, but I didn't see the 7 years. And as soon as I saw the 7 years, which was probably about a week ago, that's when I jumped on it, and then I quoted that little piece, 7 years in prison, at the top of my blog. But even with that provocation, I directly compared supervillain the DA to Nifong in the Duke rape case with regard to prosecutorial misconduct. I said, how did this go wrong? And I said, it went wrong at the school. It went wrong where this thing took place. I grew up in somewhat of a roughneck neighborhood, not bricks and chains and knives and guns, but you certainly had fights after school, and you certainly had fights in school, and you had kids that curse out the teacher and whatnot. And I also went to Catholic school, so there was a certain amount of corporal punishment and roughneck behavior that we regularly saw on a regular basis. And we knew that if you did this, that you'd get detention after school. If you did that, you could get SWATs. If you did the other thing, you could get suspension, and then you could get expelled. But there was never a case where we felt that you would have to call the police on a student. And so, again, the first thing that snaps into my mind when I wrote my blog entry, Shaquanda Cotton and You, is how did this school fail that child? And most of my outrage is directed at how easily they punted to the cops and the justice system and basically left this girl to hang out to dry. And everything else goes from there. Because then I say, well, what did who failed here? If somebody gets arrested from school, there's a parent's failure, there's a school failure, and no matter what it is that the kid does, you would expect that there would be some, like I said, escalation before detention, suspension, expulsion, military school, before they go to juvenile hall or camp, as we had. Kids, prototype gangbangers in my neighborhood went to camp, and then they came back with their 14-inch arms and saying, I went to camp. So how did that failure manifest itself? So the next thing I say is, what did the parents parents do to set up a relationship with the school such that the administrators, the staff, and all of those people who are supposed to be looking out for the best interests of the child say, we don't care. Call the cops. We're through. I mean, that's what you would expect at Columbine, where the kids are plotting to bomb, and everybody knows that they're problem kids and they're dressed up as goths and weirdos. That's when you might say, our school is not equipped to handle this. So then I looked at O Cotton. I'm going to call her O because I haven't been used to focusing on the mother so much as the child. and so I never really learned to properly pronounce her name. I know it starts with O. So I say O Cotton, Cotton's mother, is involved in a federal case, in a lawsuit across the district for Paris, Texas, that alleges discrimination, racist discrimination. And so that means, obviously, that if these things are proven true, then somebody is going to get fired, and perhaps even worse. So I see the mother as a political activist, fired up and ready to confront the school and the school district as necessary. And from that, then I read the DA's statement. It wasn't the DA's statement, it was the statement provided by the district attorney's office regarding probation. Because everybody says, why not have probation for this person? And I think that's a reasonable thing. The DA's office says that probation was rejected. That the DA's office could not be convinced that the mother, O Cotton, would provide the environment to guarantee a probation would work. And that is their discretion. This may be a political judgment. If that is a political judgment, then there's a big problem. But that also depends on whether or not we accept the possibility that Shaquanda Cotton herself would be considered a political prisoner. That is to say, let's say the whole thing is political. Let's say it's not about the shoving, but it's about Paris, Texas, and racism in Paris, Texas. If it's about racism in Paris, Texas, then you set up Shaquanda Cotton and the Cotton family to be much like the Till family. And you have to say that everybody down there is corrupt, and it's going to take an Al Sharpton or a president or the ACLU or whoever to come in and the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice to shut down Paris, Texas. And whatever you can do to get that accomplished, then you're in the political battle against the courts, the schools, the juvenile justice system, the DA's office, and everybody else who wants to shut poor Shaquanda off into prison. And if you look at it that way, and that's why I believe that the majority of the blogosphere has looked at it that way, then you kind of have to accept the cost of the imprisonment. You have to say Shaquanda Cotton is like Mumia Abu-Jamal because she represents a victim of a corrupt system. And if she walked away from that, then we wouldn't be interested. If it wasn't the 7 years in prison, then we wouldn't be interested. And so we have a situation which I find rather appalling, which is that you set up a child, a minor, to be a political prisoner. And then everything that follows from the legitimate political battles and the battles over her incarceration set up this one way or another. Now, just yesterday, I think, I listened to, for the first time, Michelle Martin's Rough Cuts piece where I heard O Cotton speak. And she didn't appear to me to be a rabble-rouser. She sounded like just an ordinary working-class woman who's caught up in a situation that's over her head. And my question then becomes exactly what is her involvement in the political battle? Did the politics spring from... Were the politics first? Was the incident first? And it's very difficult to find those kinds of things out because juvenile records are sealed and you can't really know. So who's wrong, who's right? Here's what I think should happen. If this was my world, given what's already happened, what should happen? Obviously, the federal case for the investigation of the school district should proceed. Obviously, another candidate for DA should politicize this so that they get in. Obviously, the appeal of Shaquanda Cotton's case should move forward. And obviously, O Cotton should build on the reputation that she's got to bolster her political movement. This thing is on fire. So you have to make something of it, of the political part. I mean, Shaquanda's role in this has now become symbolic. It doesn't matter if she was treated like an ordinary juvenile delinquent or not. What matters now is what people are going to make of it, and that's the interesting thing going forward. What else should happen? We should have more media attention. I mean, I'm really surprised that this hasn't blown up as big as a Pat Tillman story or a Terry Schiavo story or one of these other human interest stories that get under people's skin and make them rant and rave. So I'm still kind of surprised that it's limited to black audiences on the blogosphere and a few small pieces. I haven't seen any of the major legal blogs. I haven't had any attorneys come to the site except one who represented himself as the appellate attorney, which brings up another interesting point. And this is really key. If the DA's office did not offer any probation to Shaquanda as a first offender, then, and the appeal is based on that, then I'm definitely with the appellate side. If the judge and the DA made a reasonable assumption that the conditions put forth in an offer of probation could not be followed or would not be followed, then I give them the benefit of that doubt. However, the guy who came to my website and represented himself as the appellate lawyer says that it's not in the record, and the DA did not offer probation. So that's a really key thing. If somebody's lying, whoever's lying really gets it. I mean, they really get it. And so it comes down to really whether we should look at this as a political case or whether we should look at just as a juvenile adjudication. And it's already beyond just the simple facts of the trial, and it's in the political realm. So the question is, can the grassroots bring appropriate pressure to bear to get somebody in the DA's face and say, did you or did you not offer probation to this child? And if you did not, why not? And I believe in the worst case scenario against the juvenile justice system, they're going to say, well, her mother was, and then they're dead. They say her mother was associated with this political group. Now, it's okay for me as an independent blogger and conservative voice to say, I think the new Black Panthers are poison and everything they touch, they poison. And it's a damn shame that Cotton went to them for advice. I mean, I've seen the website for the CCFR, I think, or CCRE, Concerned Citizens for Racial Equality, who I believe are plaintiffs in the class action suit against Paris, Texas, alleging racial discrimination. That website is cheesy. It's more cheesy than my daughter's MySpace page. And if that's the level of political support that Cotton has for her daughter in her case against Paris, Texas, they're in big trouble. So somebody needs to get Barry Scheck or some high-powered attorney down into Texas on this woman's side if the political case is going to go forward. Because I believe that the political advice that was offered to Cotton messed her up with the DA's office. So Cotton made a political choice, I believe. The DA's office made a political choice. It's obviously much more damaging for them to have not offered probation to Shaquanda Cotton based on, you see how complicated it is? Based on a political judgment of Cotton's political sensibilities. Basically, if they made a rash judgment about her, they're in trouble. If I make a rash judgment about her, I'm just I can do that. But and people have told me about that on my website. But that has to do with higher issues that I feel about black politics in general, and I want to cover that in a little bit. So, bottom line is, this has become an extraordinary case, And it's a case in which the appeal is very important, and the findings of the appeal are very important, because obviously Judge Superville can be reversed, the conviction can be reversed, and or a pardon can be granted. You know, if I was the governor of Texas, I would look very closely at a pardon. And so the next place I suppose I would look is in the Texas legislature to see what kind of bills are being introduced, and see who's climbing on board to look closer into this, because that's really going to determine whether the political efforts behind this are going to be a success or not. So that's yet to be determined. My hope is that, you know, Shaquanda Cotton can get back to a normal life, and I would have done everything possible to keep her out of the system, to not even go there, because when you get in the system, this is the speed. It's going to be slow, the resolution is going to be fuzzy, and it's going to be a bunch of lawyers positioning, and your common sense doesn't dictate. But when you live in under the rule of law, that's what you have to go with, and you really can't politicize the courts. So while it may have been in their discretion to not offer probation, that was not a wise choice, given that they made the decision for the wrong reasons. And everybody's going to cover their butt, and that's why it's going to take a brilliant attorney to get through the weeds here and get to the bottom of this. Now, I think the real reason that people want to hear me out or say anything else is to discover what it is about my old school philosophy that puts me to give the benefit of the doubt with the juvenile justice system. Okay, so again, as soon as I heard this story, I said the failure was at the school. It wasn't the juvenile justice system. The cops didn't do wrong. The DA didn't do wrong. The judge didn't do wrong. The system didn't do wrong. The youth authority is not wrong. It's once you get over that fence, you're in dangerous territory, so what the heck do you expect? My point was not to criticize the system, but to oh, you can't see my hand. Not to criticize the system on that side of the cop line, but to criticize the community that's supposed to be protecting Shaquanda Cotton. So how do I get on the side of defending a potentially racist system and writing off Cotton as one of the consequences of that? When you prosecute 370,000 juvenile delinquency defendants a year, why do I pick this one, which seems egregious, and go on the side of the system? And why do I treat her like everybody else who's accused of a violent, felonious assault? I do that in the context of the politics of the old school. Now, one of the things that's gotten very big here is that the black blogosphere is getting some mention because of this particular issue. And I have an issue with black politics as it takes its strength and momentum from the defense of criminals. And I'm well known for this, and I get in trouble for it all the time with progressives because I have called them the enemy, and I've named them the coalition of the damned. And I find it not in the best interest of African Americans to jump on the bandwagon against the police, against the courts, against the district attorneys, against the system of law and order, despite its flaws, because often, and more often than not, it's done over people who are not worthy of that. Now, I was one who rejoiced when Geronimo Pratt was set free, and it was 20 years too late, but the system worked finally. You got a good judge who could see the facts, who could get to that thing. But I did not support the case of Devin Brown, the juvenile who was shot by police in a high-speed chase at 3 o'clock in the morning in a car that he had stolen. And I did not support the defense of Tookie Williams, the leader of the Crips, who was executed in California. And I did not support the case of another guy whose name escapes me, who was beat upside the head with a flashlight by a police officer in another high-speed chase. So I look at how black politics is shaped the way it is, and what our focus is, and where our passions are with regard to the cases that we take up. And so in this particular case, I ask, number one, should a juvenile defendant become a hero or a symbol of black politics? Now, I recognize that black politics is very broad. You can't just put it in one bucket. There's liberal black politics, there's progressive black politics, there's conservative black politics, there's apathetic black politics, and there's reactionary black politics. There's all different kinds. The point is, my job is to represent conservative black politics, and also, and I do that not because I want to be a conservative, but because I honestly believe that it is in the interest of African American as a whole. And so the direction that this politics should take is one that is responsible and that works with the system, because I'm interested in the upward mobility of African Americans, which means there are a lot of lessons that we have to learn on our way up. And I suppose that's a little bit over the top for as far as this discussion is concerned, but it gives you a basic idea of where I am. Again, and I would say that the new Black Panthers and the MySpace folks are really not adequately representing Shaquanda Cotton. So I will conclude basically by saying that I am hopeful, in the same way I was for the victims of Katrina, that surviving this catastrophe, whoever's fault it is becomes a priority, and there is a definite path for recriminations. The judge obviously will be held responsible. The jury will be held responsible for their decision. The parents in the community church, everybody who was unable to keep Shaquanda Cotton out of the hands of the police, and really, one person I haven't mentioned in this is the 58-year-old woman, the victim of this. Now, I haven't looked to see how extensive her injuries are or not, and I've heard it claimed that she was not injured. If she didn't have to go to the hospital, then yeah, but I mean, you can get a bloody nose, a black eye, and a lump in the head, and not go to the hospital. I know, because I've been there. But still, it's on her head too, to press charges and make sure that they would be felony charges if she was faking, and if she was part of the school's vendetta against O. Cotton and her federal case. Still, in the context of black progress, I don't know what we stand to gain as a nation based on the results of this test in Plano, Texas. Or not Plano, I'm sorry, Paris. Because I'm going to be charitable and not go there. But if there's a general presumption, and there is, that has helped define this case with regards to what kind of racism you can find in Paris, Texas, a purported racist backwater, then people ought to know. People ought to know. And they ought to act accordingly based upon what they know. If the chances are that as soon as you get into the system you're going to be abused, then you really ought to think twice about where you live. And I understand and recognize that people can't just migrate, but that is always an option. and on the whole, speaking for myself, I'd rather live in a town that was built after Jim Crow was defeated, and so we would have a town with no history of Jim Crow judges or DAs or anything like that, and no vested interest in that racist past. So I know it's going to be hard for black folks who live in certain small southern towns. I know. I've lived in the South myself. But I'm going to leave it at that. This is Michael David Cobb Bowen for Cobb Vision. Peace.